talking with saxophonist Paul Combs. Paul, thank you for talking with me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Eric.
Good. You just moved to California, left us in Massachusetts. Why'd you do that?
Oh, the winter finally got to me, Eric.
Really?
And,
Was that what? That's
well,
what.
that was the trigger. That was the trigger. And then as I have friends out here. In fact, last summer I saw them, and we realized we hadn't laid eyes on each other for 10 years. And these are some friends that one of them goes back to 1969.
Oh, okay.
You know, so it's not like I'm a stranger out here. I've always enjoyed it out here, and it's beginning to feel like there's more opportunities for me as a musician out here.
Really? So you are already plugged into?
Yes, I am. I am. There's a salsa band that's waiting for me to play baritone saxophone in it. And,
really?
Yeah. And when I checked in at the Union, they were very, very hospitable. And I mean, it's live music is under duress everywhere. I don't mean to say it's a paradise, in that sense. I think, and I know this talking with other musicians of my generation, or at least jazz musicians of musicians actually in several different genres of my generation. While people know who we are and speak of us with respect, we just can't seem to get any traction right in Boston. For several years now, I've been all the gigs that I do are basically up in the Merrimack Valley and in southern New Hampshire. And
you lived in Cambridge, right?
And I lived in Cambridge.
Right.
So it was always a haul. But I owned the house, so I wasn't about to just move and leave it. And I liked living in Cambridge. It just, I couldn't, the days of Riles had changed ever since Jack sold it. And 1369 was gone, and back in the, we used to have the Sunflower, and we had, sometimes you could pick up a night at the Casablanca with just
I don't even remember the Sunflower.
The Sunflower, yeah, the Sunflower was on with JFK.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In the hotel there?
No, it was a restaurant. It was on JFK Street, just down the street from the Tasty. Right, if you remember the Tasty, probably is, and a lot of your listeners don't, but and we were at Harvard Square. It was in Harvard Square. Oh, and there were other places. I mean, anyway, and there were brunch gigs, and then teaching. I started teaching on Sunday and made better money teaching than doing the brunch gigs. And
are you going to try to teach out here?
No, I'm retiring from teacher. I'm retiring from teaching. Except I might. There's a jazz camp in San Diego. I met those people at the Gen conference last January, and they said to get in touch. So I'll be getting in touch with them this week, and possibly next week. I'd be happy to do a 2-week thing, but I don't know whether it's age or whether it's that the older I get, the more intensely I get involved in the teaching. But where I used to be able to teach for hours, a couple hours of teaching, and I'm tired, and I have a lot of music that I want to write, and I've got Ted Dameron's centennial coming up in 2017, and I should, I guess, tell the listeners I'm Ted Dameron's biographer. Right. I have a lot of his music that people haven't heard. So,
and the name of the book that you?
Oh, it's a Dameronia from University of Michigan Press.
Okay. We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
About the teaching, though, you just I know what age group did you teach? Was
I taught all ages. I taught all ages. Yeah. I had a private studio, and up till. What was it? Till I guess 4 years ago, I was, or 4 years ago, I was still doing a couple of days a week of elementary school music teaching, and then, yeah.
What's that like teaching in an elementary school? Were you a general music teacher?
General music, yeah. When I got involved, I was hoping to be a band director, but the work that came my way was all general music, so I embraced it. I got deep into it and acquired certain skills and strategies for that, and just
Was that rewarding or frustrating? Teaching
it's both.
general music.
It's rewarding. I mean, you're trying to develop the musicality in all of your students, and especially I felt the part of the mission was just trying to teach them how to listen. You know, how to listen. I mean, you know, certainly to be musical, not to be afraid to sing. You know, go ahead and sing. If your pitch isn't great, go ahead and sing anyway. You know, be musical. You know, move, dance, you know. But, and then beyond that, know how to listen, which I think is very important.
Right. Did you introduce your younger students to jazz?
Oh yes, yeah. Sometimes, well, it was always in the mix of things. Sometimes it would be surprisingly well received.
Really?
I played Duke Ellington's Jack the Bear once for some third graders, and the next week when I came into class, they said, "Oh, Mr. Combs, you're going to play that bear music for us again?" They really liked it. I said, "Okay, I don't have it with me this week. I'll bring it back next week, sure, you know."
That must have been great to hear. I spoke years ago in a second grade class, and I tried to find jazz versions of tunes that kids may know. Mm-hmm. And, you know, not elementary music per se at all, but jazz versions of tunes they know, and kids are just up there swinging, boy.
Second graders can be absolutely wonderful. I had a group of second graders one year where I had some really, really sharp kids, just, you know, a core of them, and we created a little opera together. Yeah, you know,
really?
We took this little folk song. It was a Sleeping Beauty story folk song, and it was very simple, but you knew it was the Sleeping Beauty story. So we expanded the lyrics of the song, and I'm certified in something called Orff Schulwerk, where there's these instruments used, little mallet percussion instruments and other things, and you can take the bars out of them, the marimbas and so on, so that the kids only have the notes that they need. Then they don't have to worry about making a bad note. You know, it takes that fear level out, and they just give them parts. So it was very simple stuff, but we put this whole thing together, and the kids who were not as creatively engaged as this core of you know that I had, they were the chorus, and we used them also for the scenery. So they would be the castle, and some kids would step forward and open up and be the doors, and then come out of the castle and the witch's house. And what I had a ball with them. Third graders too. We did a lot of operas with third graders, musical theater. Sometimes there were things that were in some of the older music books, older classroom music books. I would go and dig that stuff out, and there was stuff to work with, but. Up into fourth grade, I found them a lot of fun. And when we hit fifth grade, I found that we music teachers in that environment were either really well disposed to the preteens, to the ones below the change there, and then around fifth grade they start to change into teenagers. And there was another mindset that could work with those. Oh, I see. And the people who just naturally gravitated towards that age group, they couldn't get it, what it was, how much fun it was to work with a room full of kindergartners. They said, they're just little vegetables. I said, no, they're little people. They're fascinating, and you can do all kinds of things with them if you know what to do. But then they'd hit that age. And I worked fine with them one-on-one, but a classroom full of them, I was very difficult for me. I just didn't have the right mindset.
What kind of response did you get from parents?
Generally, some people really appreciated what I did. Some people didn't care. And some people could be well, I don't know. It was some people, some more than some people just didn't give a care. And I was teaching in a town where perhaps there was a larger percentage of criminal element. I mean, I had I had these two brothers, and in 1 week, both parents went off to jail on two separate crimes, and I could tell you more stories about that.
Did you ever run across any of the students that you taught or their parents and find out they had done something with music?
Not from that school system. No. I didn't. That didn't happen there. That was a town that didn't really seem to have a good grasp on the importance of the arts in a person's life, unfortunately. But that's where I had my job, so I did it. But I had fun with the little ones. The private students are another matter. I've had that, and none of them have gone on to be professional musicians, but they've kept music in their life. And
they took the time to take private lessons, but they didn't go any further.
No, a lot of people are like that.
Yeah.
They just appreciate. They appreciate what the music is doing in their child's life. The child appreciates the music, but you have to do what I mainly do. You have to have a fire in your belly. You can't just say, "Oh, well, I think maybe I'd kind of like to be a professional." And this is true in all the arts. You've got to want it.
Right. Yeah.
You've got to have it. You got a life. You got to get up in the morning, and that life isn't right if you don't have it. And if your mind isn't that way, but you still enjoy it, then it's good to have as another part of your life. I've had adults come back. They had put their instruments away, and then they get maybe into their 30s, and they say, "Oh, I'd like to play again." So those were a lot of adults that I had. In fact, one was a trombonist. He had gotten pretty good in high school because trombone is a very secondary instrument for me, but I can play it. It was my first instrument.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
And as somebody who's trained to do instrumental music too in the schools, I did the lessons in the schools. You have to be ready to teach everything. We take to get certified. You have courses in string methods, brass methods, woodwind methods, percussion methods, choral methods. You got to be ready for whatever they need you to do. So you have to have those fundamentals.
Where did you study that?
Philadelphia Musical Academy.
Oh, okay.
That was where I did my undergraduate, and then I did my graduate work at UMass Lowell many years later, and then but back when I got certified, you didn't need a master's degree to be certified. And I was teaching in parochial and private schools, and I was hired in this town. They needed somebody. It was like a last-minute hire, but I'd already been thinking of it. So Massachusetts used to have this program, apprenticeship program, and if you had whatever topic it was, you already had a bachelor's degree in your topic of that you were teaching, your topic area. Then you could get a ticket that would let you teach for 2 years while you finished all the coursework.
Oh,
And I'd done some of the coursework, but as a composition major, I had taken those methods courses to experience all the instruments. So I had those already, and then I started knocking off the other pieces that I needed, and I got my full certification.
I know you used to do radio.
Yes, I did.
And you worked in Boston. You started in Philadelphia, I believe, right?
I started in Philadelphia. I was the morning classical guy at what is now WHYY. It was WUHY at the time. Yeah, that was my first job out of college.
Really?
And I always loved radio. In fact, I had one of those. I don't know if you know those little FM transmitters for babysitting
Right, right,
with,
right, right.
I had one of those, and I set up my own station in my apartment building
Really?
when I was a teenager.
And then you came to Boston.
And that's a whole crazy long story, but yeah, I ended up in Boston, and there was this job at BUR, and it turned out.
When was this?
This was in 1972, I guess.
Uh-huh.
It was after you were there, and they were looking for somebody who was knowledgeable about both folk music and jazz. And I was, at the time, as a professional musician, I was working in the folk music world, playing bass for people and playing some guitar and singing.
Playing bass and guitar?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, a lot of us musicians play a lot of different instruments. I've always had guitars around the house and so on, and I was finding work in that world, so, it says there was work there.
Right.
And so I had this knowledge about that, but a long-time jazz fan, jazz wannabe at that point, so I had a foot in both worlds, so they hired me. And what they wanted was to move from a folk pop morning program platform into a jazz platform. So I was basically setting up the transition.
Right.
And something had happened, and I seem to remember it was a fire physically, but maybe you remind me of a different kind of fire.
Right, yeah.
We won't get into that.
That's a different story. Right?
Well, but somehow, one way or another, the record library had been decimated. Perhaps, who knows? Anyway, the library needed to be rebuilt. So that was my area that I needed to do there at BUR. I didn't stay too long. I got the player in me got fidgety, and it was the morning shift.
Right,
I went in. You remember the transmitter there?
Right. Yes.
That transmitter was the prototype of the Philco FM transmitter.
I don't think
It had no serial number on it.
Oh, is that right? Really?
They had given it to the school after, and that was the
Really?
prototype. That was the test. But you remember that big beast in there? We'd go on and flip all the switches and take the readings.
Yes. Were you there before Tony Chinama?
Tony was a volunteer on Friday nights, or I think it was Friday nights. And we hit it off. And I used to go by his. He had this job at this movie theater in Cambridge that's not there anymore. It's a little art house movie theater. And then he had this night job there. And one thing and another, I don't remember all the details, but Charlie Perkins followed me, and then Rhonda Hamilton followed him, and Rhonda's still there doing it. And I always feel good when I hear Rhonda. If I'm listening to BGO and I hear Rhonda's voice, it's just, hey, all right, Rhonda.
when you say Tony was a volunteer, but volunteer on the air or volunteer doing something else?
He volunteered to do that show. You could come in and do shows on a volunteer basis. In fact, after I left, I came back and I did a program called Kaleidophone, where I tried to tie all different kinds of music together, and it was just a little, 1 or 2 hour show that came on once a week, and I still covered for people. I'd covered for Charlie, I covered for Rhonda, I covered for Tony, I covered for what was his name? And he was a writer too.
Jimmy Isaacs.
I'd cover for Jimmy Isaacs. For several years I came in and covered, and that was when, on the night shift, I used to come by to see you with Brother Blue.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That was when I was at BCN.
When you were at BCN.
Right. Well, I should tell you, I wasn't a volunteer at BUR. I worked 4 hours a week and got minimum wage. I think I was making $12 a week.
Yeah, right.
Living good,
Oh yeah. We make big money in radio.
What do you think about radio out here?
I love it. I listen to it back east because we don't have a whole lot, you know. So of course since I've been planning to move to San Diego, I listen to them a fair amount. But I listen to KCSM, and I listen to KUVO in Denver, and those are my three favorites that I listen to out here, and. In earlier trips out here, I'd rent a car and I'd discover, there's jazz radio all day. Wow.
You mentioned earlier about your book, Damaronia.
Yes.
When did that come out?
It came out December of 2012, and it is the life and music of Tad Dameron on the University of Michigan Press, and it was just that way back in the 1980s, I wrote a piece of music, and it occurred to me I could hear the influence of Tad Dameron in this tune that I wrote. It was originally called Loretta for a girlfriend I had at the time. But then as I listened to it, it made me think of both Tad Dameron and Coleman Hawkins.
Well, excuse me, before you go over, what's the piece called now?
It's called Bean. Beans.
I just wanted to find out what you named the piece now that you're no longer with Loretta. I'm sorry.
Well, that gets to be a factor too. Although I carry Loretta in my heart fondly. She was a good gal.
The Stevie Wonder song, My Sherry and More.
Yeah, right.
That was written for a woman, and I believe it had the woman's name in the tune, and they broke up.
Right,
so,
right, well, these things happen, man. These things happen. No, it was called Bean, and then now it's known as Hawk's Delight.
Okay.
Because Tad had all these tunes called Delights and so on. I realized later as I got into research that I thought that they collaborated on some things because there were some tunes that had both of their names, and I found out later, or I understood later, that no, it was a matter that Hawk would take part of the authorship, as a courtesy for having recorded your tune. So it was completely Tad's. Anyway, it made me think of Tad Dameron. I went to the library, and to my horror, there was no book on Tad Dameron. And I thought that somebody's got to do something about that. And then I started working on my master's degree again, and I had a very wonderful course in doing graduate level research with a terrific teacher, Dr. Alma Espinoza at UMass Lowell. And she's retired now, but I like to give her. She was a great teacher. One of my best teachers in anything ever. And so in her class, she gave me the tools. She gave me the tools to do the book. Oh, okay. So I started on it, but I had to do it part-time on the side. I'm not an academic.
How long did it take you? Because I used to check in with you. How's the book coming?
25 years.
Right.
25 years from the time I did my first interview to the time it came out.
Really?
And first interview and first series, going to libraries and starting to dig and do research, But I wasn't working on it all the time.
Right.
A lot of things happened in those years. But
what was the feeling you got when you said it's finished?
Oh.
Can you describe that?
No, it's indescribable. It is indescribable. It was a huge weight lifted off of me.
I'm sure.
Well, it had become a serious responsibility, not only because the book was needed, but along the way, it started with Charlie Rouse. I interviewed Charlie Rouse. He, at the end of the interview, he shook my hand, he held on to my hand, he looked me in the eye, and he said, "Now promise me you're going to finish this book." So that's in 1987.
Right.
87, I think so. And by 89, Charlie had passed. I caught up with Dizzy a few years later. quickly. It wasn't a long interview. I had a question for him. He was able to answer for me. I asked him where the charts were for the 1946 big band, and he said, I don't know, man. If you find them, let me know where they are. And he did the same thing. We shook hands. He held onto my hand, looked me in the eye. Now, promise me you're going to finish this book. Then I got to interview Art Blakey. Sadly, I wasn't deep enough into I had a wonderful time hanging out with Art, but I wasn't deep enough into my research to really have the questions that would have unlocked his mind. The frustrations of doing this stuff. A pleasant couple of hours with him in his hotel room. Got to leave, checking. Promise me you won't finish this book. Holy cow. So, and then he passed.
There's no pressure when all these cats say to you that, right?
I mean, even if they lived, but it's like, this was almost their dying words, man. And any time it felt like, I don't know if I can do this. And then I think, no, I got to do it. And, so one way or another, I kept plodding ahead and getting better and better at it. And then I was so lucky to get the University of Michigan Press. It was at an IHA conference, and for a couple of years, they sent their acquisitions editor to do the booth, which is kind of wild because this guy, I later found out from him towards the end of the process, he's the acquisitions editor for the whole span of what they do. This guy is working on 100 books at a time, but they sent him to, I don't know, so he went.
So how many other companies did you try shopping around? You have any idea?
I was looking at Oxford, because Oxford's the primo, And so he asked me, I said, well, I was looking at Oxford. He said, well, you'd consider us too. So I said, okay, thank you very much, and I kept this number. And then I got the deal with Oxford was to propose the book to him would have been like writing a master's thesis. I mean, it was what they, it's like, so I called up Chris Hebert at Michigan, and I said, how about I bring you 3 chapters and a detailed outline? He said, oh yeah, we'd look at that. So okay, fine. So the next year he was there again. It was in Toronto, and we had lunch, and I gave him those things, and Lewis Porter was their advisor for that part, for the jazz series of their publications. And when Lewis saw it was a book on Tad Dameron, he said, yeah, sign the guy up.
Yeah, good, yeah.
And then since then, Lewis and I have become friends, and but it was just happening at the right time that I got to meet Chris Hebert from Michigan, and then that Lewis was right on top of the project. He felt it was very, very worthy, and I guess he liked what I had presented, at least that I gave that much. But then I did 13 drafts, and the 13th draft, perhaps it was more like 14 or 15 drafts. When I got to the 13th draft, the revisions I just stopped making, and starting afresh. Not fresh, but I'd copy the whole book in, but I'd call that a new draft, and then I didn't keep the old one. But when I got to the 13th one, I just kept polishing it until everybody was satisfied that it was quite a process. But Tad Hirschhorn down at the Institute of Jazz Studies, who I'd gotten to know through my research there, Tad had written this book, excellent book, on what am I blanking? Jazz at Philharmonic.
Norman Granz.
Norman Granz. He wrote this book on Norman Granz. A really important book. And he had a guy at Doubleday, and then Doubleday was sold, and they had not yet signed the contract, and his guy was sent packing, and he spent another, I don't know how long, but it was years before he finally got that book published. And here's a man, he's at the Institute of Jazz Studies. He's written a book on Norman Granz. It's all done. It was already on the verge of being accepted at Doubleday, and getting it published was just a long, tedious process for him. So I thank my lucky stars
Right,
at
right.
what happened for me, because a lot of people, who's Tad Damrau?
Right, that's
which
what
is
I was
why I
gonna say.
wrote the book.
Norman Granz is probably better known
Oh, yeah,
than Damron is.
absolutely,
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a very good book, by the way.
Yeah.
I would recommend that, but
You remember the name of the book?
not offhand. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm
Okay.
getting to where.
And the author's name again?
Tad, Tad, Hirshhorn, Hirshorn.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Tad Hirshhorn. It's on University of California. Finally
Okay.
picked it up.
Uh-huh.
So if you go to their site and put in Norman Granz and Tad Hirshhorn, you'll come
find
up
it.
with the book.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.